It's no secret by any stretch of the imagination that I'm a big fan of how Jay was characterized and where his story took him in Dragon's Rising Season 3. Last season really cemented that Jay could be interestingly written in modern Ninjago, and that his memory loss arc could be something more than and then he got his memories back. So in the lead up to Season 4, I think the continuation of this arc has been the thing I've been the most intrigued by. As of writing this, the full trailer for Dragon's Rising Season 4 has just dropped, and usually this would mean absolutely nothing for what I upload on here, but I have some thoughts regarding this trailer and Jay's involvement in it that I want to talk about briefly. There isn't a lot of Jay in this trailer, but what we do get is this brief look into what his story will be, so the clip with that is as follows.
If I'm gonna be a ninja, I need to remember my forgotten memories.
Maybe it's just me, but this bit of a trailer really doesn't give off a very good impression for what his story is going to be next season. And I think depending on how they follow through with it, they might completely misunderstand what makes Jay's story work as well as it does in Dragon's Rising. The very core of Jay's story last season was that he isn't the same guy that he used to be, and throughout seasons 2 and 3, we see him and others try and grapple with who he is and who he might be. Jay himself is very firm throughout Season 3 on not being the same person he once was, regardless of whether that person was working for the administration, fighting alongside Raz, or battling the forces of evil with a ninja. The entire conflict of that storyline comes from Jay not necessarily wanting to be hung up on the past and embracing who he is now, which is a huge point of contention with the ninja, particularly Nia, who consistently tries to tell him who he's supposed to be. The story comes to a head with Jay and Nia seemingly accepting that Jay's memories are gone and that he doesn't remember anything, but his memories don't need to define him, and despite not having them, he still wants to be better to those around him because he cares. It's a lovely little story about both Jay and Nia accepting each other and accepting that things won't go back to the way they were. And I think when you take a step back, the message is ultimately that the past doesn't need to define who you are, which is a really potent message to send through the character of Jay, which was flanderized and made into a joke for years. I figured that the continuation of the story would be an extension of this, with Jay trying to not let his shattered soul get the better of him while they're stranded in what seems to be the land of monsters. This, however, does not seem to be the case, and I can't say I'm particularly fond of the route they're taking for the future of Jay's story. I think with what we've seen from the trailer, it's still possible to have his story be about his conflicting morals, but I think framing it through the lens of Jay needing his memories back to do the right thing would be incredibly weird, since the story in Season 3 ends with him saving the day without even knowing who he and Nia really are and what they are to each other. I think even if he doesn't end up getting his memories back from this whole administration ordeal, it's still a pretty big misunderstanding of what came before. Having Jay's memory loss arc go from Jay realizing that he can do the right thing despite not remembering the people he fights for, to believing that he needs those memories back to do the right thing and to be a ninja, kind of sucks. And I think it's a huge shame that he's forfeiting his current identity to get his memories back when he's shown absolutely no interest in doing so prior to this instance in the trailer. I've seen it speculated that he's doing it because Nia can't cope with him not remembering, but even that would be a pretty significant deviation for the story to take, because Nia came to accept Jay's memory loss, and again, it's not something that Jay needs to be a part of a ninja team. The whole idea that Jay needs to get his memories back to be a ninja or part of a team is such a disappointing move for the story to make, especially when Season 3 leaned so heavily into the idea that the choices you've made don't define you, and they don't necessarily mean that you can't do the right thing. Also, quick side note, and this is somewhat nitpicky I suppose, but the Land of Madness being the set piece for the story is so incredibly boring. I was really betting on the Land of Monsters being where they wound up post Season 3, and that has seemingly been thrown out of the window for Madness, which I'm sorry is really stupid when Raz apparently sent these guys to the farthest reaches of the merged lands. My bad for thinking that we'd see our characters interact with a somewhat newer location instead of the fields of rocks we visited in episode 4 of the show. You cannot tell me that the farthest corners of the merged lands are just some rock dudes and dead guy mud. Deeply silly stuff. Back to Jay though, his story taking such a hard left from what the last season spent so much time building up to is kind of indicative of the fact that Jay's story seems to be kind of disjointed. While I love the arc they had in Season 3, it's hard to ignore that the path they take to get there is pretty wonky and disjointed in areas. He goes from being this lazy bum at the administration who doesn't have any passion for what he does, no problems on that front, but then he joins Raz out of nowhere with no explanation and says he owes everything to him, which again, fair enough, but we don't really get to see how he goes from point A to B, but it makes enough sense that I think I can let it slide. However, last we see Jay in the tournament, he hates the ninja for ruining what he had with Raz and is incredibly upset, but Season 3 as a follow-up does nothing with Jay's feelings of being indebted to Raz and never follows up on the hating Nia aspect of his story, because he seems completely fine with coming back to a monastery with them when he has an injured leg. After this, they employ Jay's help with finding Aaron's parents since he worked at the administration, which makes enough sense on paper, But for some inexplicable reason, Jay knows exactly who Aaron's parents are and where he sent them, completely going against the idea that his job was unfulfilling and that he didn't care about anything there. There's obviously an argument to be made that it makes sense he'd know where they are since he had to file and refile the information so many times and then pass that information on to Raz, and this is certainly an argument that I've used to defend this plot point multiple times, but with Jay's story continuing to not really know where it wants to take itself, I can only really look past the issues with how it's being written so much, and the chain of events just kind of falls apart when you really put thought into it. I don't doubt that Dragon's Rising has had a plan with where they want to take Jay's story, but it's all starting to seem quite confused and muddled with where it really wants to take him, because from one season to the next, the Ninjago writers have absolutely no idea where they want to take Jay's story, and the plan seems to be shifting constantly, making it quite tough to pinpoint where it's actually going to be taken for the rest of the show. I've really liked Jay's story overall, and obviously a lot of this is just speculation on my part since we only have one line from him across the 2 trailers we've gotten, but like man, it all just seems quite messy and I'm starting to lose a lot of faith in his story. I'd like to be proven wrong though. I think Dragon's Rising Season 4 has the potential to be good and tell an interesting story that follows up Season 3 nicely, and this one line could be something I've misunderstood with its potential context. But I've come to the conclusion that Jay will most likely get his memories back no matter what by the end of Dragon's Rising, so I really hope that the path they take to get us there makes sense and is cohesive with what we've gotten previously. That's about all I have to say on this topic for now though, so thank you all for watching and I will see you all in 3 weeks when I make another video. Goodbye for now.
When you feel tired, look at yourself. Inside your heart, you will find a special place to unlock.